Hello and welcome to the SME Focus show powered by MTDCNC. I'm Mark Weymouth from the Sensor Specialist Plus Automation. Today, as usual, this podcast aims to highlight aspects of UK manufacturing and topics that are of interest to SMEs. My guest today is James Smith-Storrow, Senior Project Leader at the Continuous Improvement Consultancy, the Kaizen Institute. Hi James, welcome to SME Focus.
Hi Mark, thanks for having me on the podcast. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for coming on. I think it should be an interesting show. I'm going to kick off, however, by going back a little bit in history. I've read, if LinkedIn's to be believed, that you studied for a master's degree in chemical and process engineering at the University of Leeds. So I'm going to kick off by asking, why did you choose an engineering degree? And why chemical and process engineering? And I guess to round that out with, what did you envisage your first job was going to be when you made those choices?
So to be honest, the decision wasn't at all obvious. Up until about year 9, year 10, I was actually a pretty average student. I was getting mainly C's and maybe the odd B grade. And then GCSEs came along and something just kind of clicked. And I realized now it starts to count. So I started applying myself more. And I found I was doing really well in maths and science. So at A level, I kind of doubled down on what I was good at. So I did maths, further maths, physics, chemistry. So when it came to picking a degree, I did what probably most people do. I Googled what the highest paying graduate jobs were, and dentistry, medicine, chemical engineering, they all came up. And I ruled out pretty quickly medicine and dentistry. So chemical engineering felt like the obvious choice. It combined everything I enjoyed, and it kept a lot of doors open, which was important to me because I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do at that stage. And yeah, I selected my degree, and I kind of then envisioned maybe working at a big firm, building up some experience, and then going for chartership. I think that's the kind of standard route. But my degree was actually a master's degree with a placement year in the middle. And when I did that placement year, I worked at a very big company. But the role wasn't at all what I imagined it was going to be like. For the first few months, for example, I was doing quite repetitive tasks, which is kind of hand in hand with being a placement student, but I wasn't feeling like I was getting challenged enough. So a few months kind of go by, and I was working for the production department, and I kind of just go to projects and I asked them, is there any work or can I support in any way doing something else? Just to pick up some different exposure to things. And they kind of took a chance on me and gave me a project to lead. And it was a civil remediation project, so something very different. And it was a £250,000 project. Well, that was a total game changer for me, because suddenly I was having to devise project plans. I was involved with stakeholder management. I was responsible for implementation of deliverables. And I really enjoyed this. And I think that's what lit the spark for consultancy and why I decided to pivot away from just pure engineering. And then time goes by, I discovered Kaizen Institute, and yeah, been there ever since.
Okay, it's interesting. I thought I'd pick it up because I guess there may be parents watching where their kids are starting to make those decisions. And I think one of the beauties of an engineering qualification is it does open you up to so many possibilities. And, you know, I speak to somebody who always wanted to work in aerospace electronics, and within 6 months of doing it, thought, God, this is really dull. Like you, they give you no responsibility. And for the next 15 years, I never touched anything electronic. But I always thank the Lord that I did an engineering type qualification that I think prepares you to do so much. So that was the reason for asking the question.
That, because I think from our degree, there's maybe only a third of people that have actually stuck with just pure chemical engineering. I think a lot of people diverse into other careers.
Interesting. So you've already alluded to where you went next, but I'll put a timeline on it. So you graduated July 2020. And quite often I'll give a musical reference, and sometimes that's a long time ago. 2020 is obviously pretty recent. So we had Jaws 685 and Jason Derulo in at #1 for 3 weeks with Savage Love. So that's the earworm that can be stuck in people's minds for the rest of the day after they've forgotten what we were talking about. So July 2020, you started with the Kaizen Institute, your first and current employer, as we can see behind you. So can you tell us more about this consultancy? It obviously has the benefit of an incredibly famous name. So what's the history of the organisation and what are the services?
Yeah, so I'll actually start off with the name. So Kaizen originates from Japan, and it's formed of two words. So Kai, which means change, and Zen, which means good. So together it's change for the good. And we say Kaizen is the smartest way to run the business. It's a type of company culture that strives for excellence and the practice of improvement at all levels. And it involves everyone, every day, everywhere. And the analogy that I give for Kaizen is that it's almost like your operating system on an iPhone, the iOS system. So you might have on your iPhone, you might have different apps, but those apps, they're not going to have much use if you don't have an operating system that can support them. And that's very similar to a business. You have a lot of different departments. You know, you've got finance, you've got HR, production, maintenance. But if you haven't got a basic operating system, which is Kaizen, then these businesses in a silo view might work okay. But when you actually look at the overall value stream from an end-to-end perspective, that's where you see that the flow efficiency has issues. Okay, we start to see a disconnect.
Yeah.
So this is why it's really critical for businesses to firstly look at their flow efficiency and to understand that if you want to remain ahead of the competition, you have to be constantly, continuously improving. So you need to keep in the forefront of our minds, where in our process do we add value? Where in our process do we have non-added value activities, so waste? And we need to be in the pursuit of reducing those activities that don't add value constantly. And if we fail to do that, we're not going to remain ahead of the competition. And I always like to give an example of this. So probably a lot of people listening to this will remember Blockbuster as a, you know, it was a famous brand, the #1 video rental place. And at the time, they had dominance over that market, and they even had the opportunity to buy Netflix, but they didn't. They failed to see how they could utilize the internet, which was up and coming, and the power that streaming would have versus just physical, you know, video rentals. And because of that, they're now a thing of the past. So we have to emphasize that Kaizen, it's the smartest way to run a business because we want longevity from a business.
Okay, makes sense. So you've been in this sort of consultancy project leader role now for 5 years. So are there any particular successes that either illustrate the process, perhaps help explain it, particularly to SMEs, which is our core audience, or are there any that are just funny? So what highlights have you had across your 5 years?
So yeah, when I first started, it was definitely a steep learning curve. And even now, 5 years in, I still face new challenges all the time. One experience, though, that really stands out was during COVID. And I was working on a project in the Netherlands for a laboratory that does the test with 24-hour turnarounds. So they process the test results. And at the time, that lab was handling about 10,000 samples per day. But in order to keep its contract and avoid shutting down, it needed to double to 20,000 samples being processed over the next 6 weeks. And it had to show an increased output week on week. So they had to show they were making progress. Yeah. So rather than usually, I found myself side by side with the COO and the lab director one Saturday, literally on the lab floor, de-swabbing COVID samples. And we had to do that in order to hit our target for that week. And thankfully, from that point onwards, the improvements that we were making to the process meant I didn't have to spend any more weekends testing COVID samples. But it was quite a pinch me moment when me and a director and CEO were all operators. So I wasn't consulting on that Saturday. I was literally in the process doing the activities.
Sounds good. I think there's often a lot to be said for getting the hands on the tools, and there's no better way of motivating somebody to drive through a process than enabling them not to come in the following Saturday and the Saturday after that. So, okay, interesting. From what you've learned as an expert in lean practices, or within this organization that is expert in lean practices and working with your customers, what advice would you give to SMEs in particular, because they're our core audience? So maybe if we kick off with the question, why should an SME that's incredibly busy, why should an SME embrace lean principles?
So for SMEs, lean is really about getting more from your current resources. So smaller businesses, they don't always have that luxury of extra time, money, or people. So lean helps by cutting out waste, simplifying processes, and it's focusing on what the customer actually values. The advantage that SMEs have over the big corporations is their agility. They can learn quite quickly what the lean principles are and implement them. So my advice would be just don't overcomplicate it. Start small, involve your people, and keep the improvements simple and visible, and just keep building momentum. And if you're unsure, if you've never had any exposure to lean, look, there's a lot of companies out there that can support with that. We've got 40 years experience. You don't have to consult with Kaizen, but we do this day in and day out. So we're more than happy to support companies who feel like they just need a little bit of guidance in this. Lean's not about just copying what the big companies are doing. It's about creating a mindset of continuous improvement that becomes part of your everyday business. Done well, it makes you more efficient, competitive, and resilient.
Okay, it makes sense. I think one of the issues I quite often promote lean into SMEs is also it gives the business a clear understanding of how it works. It makes you less reliant on one or two individuals, and therefore, in the crazy world we're in now, and thinking back to COVID times, it probably makes the business more robust to cope with some of these challenges. Is that a fair comment, do you think?
Absolutely, Mark. Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, I mean, the word consultant comes with some baggage, we say, and the baggage, I guess, is associated with transformation projects that are unsuccessful, and we all think of grand governmental transformation projects. But on a more realistic manufacturing sort of perspective, can you give some thoughts, comments on why transformational projects are unsuccessful, and conversely, what you'd advise to make people more likely to succeed?
So it's a really important question, this one, because I think the statistic is about 70% of transformations fail. So, it's for a business thinking about doing a transformation. And what do we mean by transformation? So for me, it's really simple. We need to do what we're doing in a bigger way. It needs to be better. It needs to be faster. Okay. If it has all those three pillars, it's deemed as a transformation. If it fails to have one of those, it might be a breakthrough, it might be a small improvement, but we're talking about a transformation here. And I think there's three main reasons as to why transformations fail. The first, and the reason why change can even happen, it needs to have leadership commitment. So change management, it always starts with leaders. And whilst leaders very often support the idea in principle, they fail to really model the behaviors or consistently prioritize the transformation. I think the second big thing, and this one I see all the time, is there's too much focus on the tools and not actually using the tools. So organizations, you hear 5S, Kanban, these value stream mapping, they're almost buzzwords at this point. And organizations feel like they should, maybe introduce them, but the actual use of them day in and day out, that's the less interesting part. It's they almost use it like a novelty, and they don't address that deeper cultural shift that's needed to sustain them. There's been so many clients I've been to where they want to have, let's say, a bit of board to show the KPIs of the client, and we love that. Okay, we endorse that, but they would rather, let's say, have the perfect board than get something up and running this week and already start the routines of reviewing the KPIs, assessing if we've achieved the target, not achieved the target. If we haven't hit a target, what we're going to do in terms of our action plan, our PDCA. Let's review tomorrow to see if we're going in the right direction now. Have we stopped maybe a bad trend from happening? This is where the real value is coming from. And that's what a lot of businesses aren't doing. And I think the final reason is a very short-term focus. Companies don't invest in the systems, the training and the reinforcement that's needed for real lasting impact. They overestimate, in my opinion, what they could do in 3 months. They think they can probably do a cultural change in 3 to 6 months. It's not like that. It takes longer to really embed change and to really embed the new habits. It's hard, but it's well worth it when you're on the other side of that.
Yeah, I think the biggest word in continuous improvement is continuous, and that doesn't seem to be remembered by most businesses I've ever known do it. So.
Sadly not.
Okay, so you were open enough earlier to say that there's obviously lots of consultancies out there doing different things, specializing in different areas. How would you say that the Kaizen Institute differentiates itself? What's its niche? What's its strength?
So what really sets us apart, I would say, from other consultancies is we have a very hands-on approach. So we don't just design frameworks and leave a PowerPoint behind to the client. We go to the Gemba, which, if anyone doesn't know, that's the place where value is actually added on the shop floor. And we're working alongside the natural teams to understand what their real challenges are. That means we're asking questions about the process, the paradigms they might have, and we're co-creating solutions with the people that do the work every single day. So our goal isn't just to deliver a report, it's to build capabilities within the organization so improvements are both effective and sustainable. We stay engaged with the client until we achieve the results. And we measure success not only in terms of the performance, but it's also in how well the clients embrace the continuous improvement mindset and carry that forward when we're gone.
Okay. So you're talking about being very hands-on and being part of and maybe demonstrating and piloting the first activities and really getting that knowledge by being very physical and present. So my next question is probably a bit of an extreme away, but can I ask what your thoughts are on artificial intelligence in the workplace over the next couple of years? So we've gone from the very physical to the very sort of virtual and intangibles, but what are your thoughts on AI and the changes that it's going to bring?
So yeah, AI is booming right now, and I think it's going to reshape the industry in a few really big ways. So firstly, I think it's going to take over a lot of the repetitive data heavy work, which means people can spend more time doing creativity, innovation, and problem solving. I think it's also going to make operations much more intelligent. So in manufacturing services, for example, predictive analytics is going to help things like maintenance, it's going to help supply chain, and it's going to help things like quality control. And then thirdly, I think the customer experience will completely change. AI is going to allow for businesses to personalize products and services at scale. So what you get is going to feel much more tailored to you. And then I think the final big shift that's going to happen is a ramp up in innovation. So by crunching huge data sets quickly, AI can accelerate R&D, shorten time to market, and even entirely new business models they can start to create. So, but the real transformation is going to come from how people and AI work together. I don't think it's going to be a case of AI substituting, what we do in a manufacturing sense. I think it's going to be much more how we can utilize it and get value from it by removing the non-added value activities that we currently have to do.
Okay. So obviously you speak with a bit of passion about AI. Is there any particular point of reference, YouTube channel, book, anything you'd recommend to point people towards to maybe get a better understanding of AI from a manufacturing perspective?
To be honest, I would recommend, you can learn from almost anything from YouTube at this point. Okay, I'd recommend going on YouTube, and there's so many different functions that AI can do and how you can automate workflows. I'll give you some. Obviously, everyone's probably heard of ChatGPT. That's probably the most common one at this point. But there's AI that can generate you PowerPoints, for example. There's AI that can pull work for you. There's AI that can automate emails. There's so much stuff at this point. It's only going to get more and more. So I'd really just recommend go on YouTube, maybe buy a book off Amazon, and just start to understand what AI is if you're really unfamiliar with it, because it's going to start to come into a lot of different industries, and you don't want to be left behind for that shift.
Yeah, I guess my thought would be, if I was advising people, it would be look for how AI could do, search for AI and that particular thing that you want to do as your stepping stone, rather than just trying to read about AI, because it's so big and it's so nebulous. It's much better, like you mentioned, crafting a PowerPoint. If you go and look at how AI can help you with a PowerPoint, then you start to understand AI because you understand PowerPoint, and look at it that way rather than going into the vagaries of the whole thing. So, okay.
Yeah, I mean, you could even use AI to inquire about AI. You can ask ChatGPT to say, I want AI, tell me with PowerPoints, what is there out there? And it'll then pull from all the different sources how that can spot you. That's probably one of the most effective ways to actually do it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. So I don't know if the next question is going to come back with AI or not, but many people will be watching this during the weekend. It goes out on a Saturday morning every week. So can I ask you what topic or topics you would tend to be talking about if you were talking to somebody over the weekend, say in the kitchen, the party, the pub, the barbecue, rather than sat in front of a camera on the laptop? So what things do you talk about in the real time?
Yeah, so maybe AI does creep into a little bit of the conversation, but you would probably find me talking about something involving fitness. Probably, I'm really into hiking, running. Hopefully this weekend even I'm going to go to the Lake District and do a hike from Ambleside to Grasmere. So that's why we're talking about it, probably.
That makes me feel guilty because I'll be eating Grasmere ginger biscuits that somebody brought me back, but in a couple of weeks' time I'll be up there in a car. So okay, I envy you your fitness.
The weekend.
Okay. Right. So it's traditional in the show, or it's a tradition I've carried on from Chris, who founded it, to ask the guests, what do you have planned, or what do you hope to achieve in the next 12 months? And that can be personal, work, all of the above, whatever you fancy mentioning.
So to be honest, I'm hoping to maybe do some traveling next year and visit some place on my bucket list. So it's still very much an idea at this stage, but I'm looking more and more into it. I feel like this might be my last window of opportunity for quite a long time. So yeah, that's my idea at the moment.
That sounds exciting and a bit like AI. That sounds a bit of a nebulous task. There's an awful lot of interesting places to go and visit.
Yeah. I need to, maybe I ask ChatGPT where I should go.
Yeah. Okay. So how do people go, when they go out, how can they find out more about the Kaizen Institute? How maybe do they follow yourself or contact you?
So if you want to learn more about Kaizen Institute, there's lots of useful information on our website. And if you're interested in learning a bit more about the Kaizen culture paradox, our founder has recently published a new book on this topic, so I recommend checking that out. If you want to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn as James Smith-Storrow, so yeah, feel free to reach out.
Okay, brilliant. So before I sign off, can I ask you then, do you have a final sentence, question, comment, witty anecdote? What would you like to sign off with?
So I'll first just say thanks for having me on the podcast, Mark, but I'll leave with this. So Kaizen philosophy is about incremental improvement. And if you improved 1% every day for 1 year, so 365 days, you would have improved over 3,600%. A lot of people think it would be 365% because they underestimate the effect of compounding improvements stacked over time.
Sounds quite a thought-provoking one. Thank you for that, James. It feels like you've probably given us all some homework to do over the next week to get out and look in our businesses and start thinking where we can improve. So thanks very much for being a guest and giving us all something to do. I will wrap up by the usual words of saying, if you've got a comment, a suggestion, and particularly if you'd like to appear in a future episode, please email us at inquiries@mtdcnc.com or contact myself, Stuart Whitehead, or Joe Reynolds. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Use some time to think about improving your businesses. From me, Mark Weymouth at the Sensor Specialist Plus Automation. Cheers. Have fun.